So I'll tell you a little different story from what you hear in the daily debate and read in the newspapers, because we are all told that we are now entering the sixth extinction. And I'm going to tell you a little about the same history as Pete told you. You have to look into that into detail and see, are these threats really, are they real? And are the numbers we are given, are they correct? So this is one of the latest curves that you have seen being published by the IPBES this year, telling us that this is what is going on: the extinction of the different groups of animals, amphibians, mammals, birds, reptiles, fish. It looks like it's going up. And what does this look like? These guys as well, they do love hockey sticks. It's the same story as we see when it comes to the temperature trend. We have something which is supposed to be good, and it's turning into something which is supposed to be horrible. The extinction rate is increasing. But let's take a look at it in a more detail. Now, first a few other slides. We have heard this story now for many years. First, now in 1979, Norman Mailer gave out a very important book saying that 40,000 species are going extinct every year. That's an enormous amount of animals and plants. And then for a conference on biodiversity in Germany in 2008, they said that 3 species are going extinct every day, coming up to 26,280 species. Every hour, yeah. And then last year we heard that the insects are going extinct. We heard that from Germany, that they're in different environments, could see that the insects are decreasing. Okay? And then this autumn we have heard a lot of stories about the Amazon forest, which is burning, and we are especially worried about these forests in warm regions. So this story has it's been going on for a long time, and it's repeated and repeated. It seems to be that people like all these stories about things that are going bad. Well, yesterday when I was in TV2 and discussed with the TV2, they were so angry with me, telling that I have to. This conference is focused on that there is no climate crisis. I was accused of saying that there was no climate crisis. So I was asked then by the journalist yesterday, can you give me any publications where they say that there is no climate crisis? It's like proving that there is no God. We cannot do that. But and people like this story about what is going wrong. But how did this story about the 40,000 species show up? In Myers, he wrote a very important book in 1979, which was called The Sinking Ark, read by a lot of people. But it all came from a conference in 1974, where a lecturer just guessed that there would be 1 million species dying for 25 years. And that gives you 40,000 per year. So this is a circle argument. But it has been alive now since 1979, and many, many people, and the environmental movement, and the journalists, they refer to this number of 40,000 species. But what do we know? If we look at this in more detail, you remember the hockey curve that I showed you in the beginning. If we look at it, that was given for 100 and 100 and 100 and 100 years, from the year 1500. But you can clearly see that there is an increase in the extinction of species. But what happens then? In the latest years, it goes down. And this is what is really true, that the extinction rate is on the way down. And these numbers come from a unit called IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and they are sitting in the same building as WWF in Switzerland. So these are really connected to the environmental movement, though they are research institutions as well behind the IUCN. But these are the figures, and really there are very, very few species going extinct. Maybe half a species going extinct every year. We are not certain that there has been any animals or plants going extinct for the last 10 years. And still you hear the story every day that we are going into a mass extinction. So, these are the numbers from the IUCN. This is what we know of the extinctions since year 1500. 183 mammals gone extinct, 156 birds, and so on. It adds up to 860 species being lost since the year 1500. In addition to that, there are some few animals and plants that are not still alive in nature. So there's another 65 or something animals which are not anymore living in nature, but they are only living in zoos and so on. But you can see from the number 40,000 species per year down to 860 species lost since year 1500. That's a big difference. It's not even 1/20,000th part of the extinctions that we hear about every day. And this is an important curve when it comes to extinctions, because this is the theory on which is all based, which is called the SAR curve, species area relationship, telling us that if we increase the area, the number of species will go up. And this is based on island biology theory, saying that they turn the model around and say that if we reduce the area, the number of species will go down. And the theory says that, okay, let's reduce the area by 90%, and then we got the reduction to half of the animals and plants living there. But there are large exaggerations when it comes to we don't know about that happening on islands, and it certainly does not happen on the continents. But this is the theory behind it. It's the SAR theory, the SAR curve. Okay, but animals and plants certainly are threatened. So this is part of it is true, and the main reason why animals and plants have problems is that we are taking the area where they are living. That's a really big problem, and agriculture is the most important. Secondly, introduced species, especially species being introduced to small islands. Most of the animals we have lost are lost on small islands. And then hunting. A lot of the whale species were hunted nearly to extinction. And we can hunt nearly anything to extinction. If it's large animals, they can easily be hunted to extinction. But we can choose. Susan's going to talk about the polar bear later, and the polar bear populations were hunted down to they were reduced down to small volumes and small numbers because of the hunting. And pollution, of course, might be a reason. And today, of course, we are hearing all the time that the animals and plants will go extinct because of the climate change. We don't know about any species yet so far that have gone to extinction because of the climate change. So it's not happening. There is no examples of that. None. So the most important activity when it comes to problems for the biodiversity will be the agricultural activity, because they take a lot of space. There's no other activity being so important for the wildlife than the agriculture sector. But there is one. The facts are that since 1960, we need 68% less area to produce the same amount of food.
Question, mankind, or?
Yeah, to produce the same amount, humans to produce the same amount of food. So we don't need that much space any longer to produce the same amount of food to be able to live good lives. So this has been very important. Yeah. In general, like we heard in the talk of Peter and Jødal, telling us that the overall view is that the problem for animals and plants will be cold climates. There's no doubt about that. Biologists know that, and they have known that for a long time. Warmer climates are better climates for life than cold climates. It's always been like that. And now this has been turned upside down in the climate debate. We are supposed to fear warmer climates. Look at these birds. These are dead small grey tits in a nest. A photo taken in Finnmark in 2017, in a period in June, 10th of June. It was extremely cold. All the small chicks are dead. And the same goes for a lot of the birds. They cannot stand the cold days in springtime. So cold is difficult. The bees, they don't fly when it's too cold in the spring, and they don't collect pollen. There will be no honey. So they could be given a lot of examples of cold climate as a problem for animals. So, but we can take a look at the slide here telling us where has the animals gone extinct. It's got a little out. This was no good. But it's in Norwegian, but it's telling us that the problem will be on islands. Most of the species have gone extinct on islands and not in the continents. And there are many more. The problem is quite small when it comes to plants. There are quite few plants that have gone extinct than vertebrates. Okay, since it came outside the screen, I don't know why. I'll jump further on. So, introduced species. Okay. Someone has touched it. Right. These are extinct species. And these are extinct species because of introduced species. So introduction of species is a great problem. Yeah. And the problem is predation. Predation is an activity going on when one animal eats another animal. While competition, plants compete for space. So competition is not the big problem. Predation is the big problem. And especially introduced species on small islands, like the cat, has been a large problem on small Pacific islands. And or the rat, Rattus norvegicus, the brown rat, got a Norwegian scientific name, Norvegicus. It was never in Norway. It has been taken here, but still called Rattus norvegicus. Unfair. So we are hearing all the time that because of the increase of temperature, like James Hansen says, that when the climate gets warmer, a lot of the species, they will have no place to go. They cannot go further north. They cannot go further up in elevation. So they will go extinct. But then, if we take a look at some mountain peaks around in Europe, this is from Switzerland, where they have looked at 12 mountaintops, and they say that in 1905 we had 100% level of species. And if you look at these mountaintops later on in 1985, you see that there are 86% more species, and later on in 2003, 138% more. And this is a general picture. The increase in temperature makes the environment richer in species. That's very common. It goes for birds, it goes for mammals, it goes for a lot of other animals. Think of this as a kind of picture of Norwegian flora. And think of this where the numbers of species that we had in year 1700. And then became a process. And we got in. These ones showed up. That one. And that one. In Norway, in Sweden, in nearly all islands in the world, half of the species in these places are introduced species. So we have increased the number of species to an extreme extent. Because it's not like that in a big continent like United States. They have increased the number of species by around 20% by import by people for a long period. But America is a large continent with a lot of species. But still, in every single community in Norway, in Sweden, in a country, we will experience that the number of species has increased, and there is a perfect relationship to 1-to-1 when it comes to native and introduced species. We see that everywhere. It's a general picture, 1-to-1, which means we are all experiencing a much larger diversity than anyone else before us. We have lost some species on the global scale. Some have gone extinct. I showed you the number 860. So totally there are fewer animals and plants today, but I'll come back to that a little later. But the general picture is that in our surroundings, where we live, the places we have our cabins, people will experience a much larger biodiversity than people did 100, 200, 300 years ago. That's the general picture. And there is a project called DICE, Delivering of Alien Invasive Species for Europe. They say that for Europe, 1,200 new plant species in Europe for the last 500 years. This is what we know, but the story is different. We all hear that we're living in the sixth extinction. So, I told you about all these animals and plants, especially plants that have arrived. But the story now is that if you take away just a few of them, the whole ecosystems will collapse, which is not correct regarding ecological theory anymore. It was a kind of theory in the 1950s, 1960s, but people don't believe in that anymore. But this is the story that we read in the newspapers every day, and which means that they all think this is going to end. Take away a few species, and the whole system's going to collapse. That's the wrong story. That means that our Prime Minister, Gro Harlem Brundtland, she says everything is connected to everything. And she thought of that if you take away just a little piece in such an ecosystem, it means that it's all going to die. No. This is not good biology. It's not like that. You can take away a lot of the species, and it will still continue as a system. But we are talking about two different problems. One problem is the extinction of species, that we have no more doo-doo, and other animals and plants, they have gone extinct. And we're afraid of others to go extinct. The other problem is reduced populations. And when we heard the debate last year from Germany about insects, that was not related to the extinction of insects. That was related to smaller populations of insects, which of course we can find. Humans are changing the environment in a lot of places, and that means that there will be reductions in populations. But the popular press, the newspapers, the radio stations, they are mixing it up. So we have to ask them all the time, what are you talking about? Is it extinction of species, or are we talking about reduced populations? Yeah. This is some words we hear all the time about the natural or unnatural biodiversity. We hear all the time that something in ecosystems are natural, they belong there, they should be there, while all the introduced affairs, they are unnatural. But in biology, something like that does not exist. In biology, nothing makes sense except in the light of evolution. And in evolution, everything is changing all the time. And when things changes, and they change all the time, it's not bad, it's not good, it's just something else. So this crab here, the king crab, has been introduced. A few individuals were released in the 1960s in Russia, and they spread on to Norway, and now we have a population of this king crab. Some of the political parties, they want to take them totally away. It's impossible. You can't do that. You can't take away this species. It has much better be regarded as a resource, and it is important in northern part of Norway. In general, it seems like we like the losers and we don't like the winners. So this one, I think it's in English called lupin, like we do in Norwegian. This one, if it is unpopular because it is successful. So it establishes some places in large populations, and because it has success, we don't like it. And yeah, good species are doing good, and I'll jump over that. But it seems to be a general. People think that, and in the debate you can hear that we are regarding the bees as very useful and intelligent and good animals, and they are always doing bad. All the good species have problems by the bad individuals, like the mosquitoes. We are never worried about mosquitoes going extinct. They are worried about that they are doing too well. So this is a general trend in the discussion. So, and in the debate, why are we so afraid of change? This is the Arctic fox, which has large populations in Norway. They have been decreasing for decades, and we are very worried about this one getting too low numbers. People love it. It's a wonderful animal. It's a beautiful one. So we absolutely want that one back again. But this one, the Raccoon Dog, it is living in Sweden. It's living in Finland and other places. This one is coming into Norway now, and it's red listed, it's blacklisted, which means that if it pops up anywhere in Norway, you can all go and shoot it. We don't want it. We want this one because this is a correct animal. It has been here before. Well, this one was not here before, so it's a unnatural animal. It doesn't belong here. It's a kind of ecological jury sitting there somewhere, connected to the departments or what it is, coming up with the judgments of what we need and what we do not need. It's bullshit. So this is, how much time do I have? Much time. This is a list of, I started to show you the number 860, which is the ones that have gone extinct. And all these animals and plants, they are listed into different categories. Extinct in wild, I mentioned that's 68. Critical, endangered, vulnerable. We are very worried about these categories. And totally there's a number of, you see the numbers, they're quite large. But there are some trends in these numbers. Okay, let me first say and repeat that again, that there are animals being threatened. like the rhino. There are 3 different species of rhinos. One of them is not threatened, 2 of them are. So absolutely, there are animals and there are plants being threatened. So we should care about that and take actions against that. And a lot of good work has been done to conserve the species. That is important. So I'm not saying that there are no problems, but I say that the problem is exaggerated. And some species, introduced species, it is a problem and has been a problem, like the rabbit in Australia. No doubt about that. Some might change ecosystems, but the point is that on this list, with all the animals and plants you saw on the last list, the numbers from Norway and from many other places is that most of the species being listed there are living on the edge of the distribution. So if we break down the list of the animals and plants on the Norwegian list in the threatened categories that we are saying are on the edge of extinction, nearly all of them are living, either they are extremely rare or they are living somewhere in Norway or somewhere in Sweden, but they have their main distribution other places in the world. They're mostly then living in Russia, or they are living in the European continent, but they are still listed as threatened species. And when we hear this description of and listing of all the threatened species, we are all thinking that this is our fault. But it's not our fault that most of these species are just living on the edge of the distribution. So they are put into wrong categories. And but the politicians use that all the time. They say that, oh, there are so many threatened animals. We have a journalist in Norway called Ole Mattismoen. Yeah, you laugh. He is a really worried journalist, writing articles in Norwegian newspapers all the time. He's been doing that for 40 years, telling us that we only have now a few weeks still to go. And we have survived a lot of these periods of 20 days or 4 months or whatever. So he had an article in Aftenposten this summer telling us that this creature used it as an example of how bad we are doing in nature. So this one was on the front page of Aftenposten, and he had 2 double pages inside. Yeah, this is the Latin name. He even managed to get a wrong Norwegian name. So this one, but the problem with this animal is that we have so far, in 1865, we have found one individual of this animal in Stabekk, about 12 kilometers away from here. It has been found one time. And he uses it as an example of how badly Norwegians operate in nature. But this is all wrong, because we have found one individual. And so we are not threatening this animal. Like I said, it has not gone extinct. The individual has died. And that goes for many of these species that are supposed to have gone extinct because of human activities. No, they have been found 1 or 2 or 3 times in Norway. This species, with this Latin name, was found in the 1850s a few times in northern part of Oslo, where there was a small population, and it became a part of the city. Okay, so it has gone because of human activities, but it was extremely rare, and it is not a catastrophe that it disappeared. This is the common whitefish. This is listed as threatened in the international list of IUCN. You can go out in Norwegian or Swedish, Finnish nature, and you can fish them in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tons. It's an extremely common animal, but still listed among threatened animals in the world. It's bullshit. It's not threatened. But I'll tell you about another a big issue when it comes to biological diversity. And this is something that is never mentioned in the public debate. Biologists know about it, but they don't tell about it. In a way, humans have, once upon a time, all the continents were gathered and stayed together. And this is very important when it comes to biodiversity. And nowadays, because of the human activities, we have, in a way, made a new Pangea, because we are transporting animals and plants all over the world, and we bring them together, animals and plants that have never ever been in contact before. And that, in biology, that is extremely important, because isolation is the process in which new species are created. That's the only way, or nearly the only way, that new animals and plants are created. It's done by isolation. And now, since we have created this new Pangea, animals and plants, they get in contact. So they are meeting up all the time. And then happens a lot of interesting things. So, we can create new animals and plants. Or not humans, but they are, and we are not creating them. The animals and new plants are coming up in 3 different ways. Most of all by geographical isolation, or by hybridization, or by making up of new ecological niches. So this is the normal way of creating animals and plants. And what we now do is that we have brought animals and plants into islands. We have brought them into new continents where they are separated from the main species, the main populations elsewhere in the world. And when time goes, these plants and animals, they will evolve into new species. So, for example, this one is a species that was brought to United States in the 1940s. It was taken from Spain, and then it lived in Spain until it lived in United States, and it's still living there. It had established nice populations. A few years ago, some botanists tried to. They brought the same species from Spain, and they tried to make up new offspring from this plant, from the individuals living in California with the individuals that came from Spain. And what they discovered, to their large surprise, was that these plants had extremely reduced possibilities to give new fertile offspring. The offsprings, they were reduced by 50. There were 2 different species. One of them had reduced offspring by 44%, the other one by 60%. That other species had lived there for a little longer time. But still, it was a period of 75 years and 150 years. And during this period, they had started the process of becoming new species. So normally, biologists think that the time required to make new species is about 1 million years, or even longer periods. No, it can work much faster. This is a grasshopper species, which has been living in Hawaii for a long time. And about 15 or 20 years ago, there was introduced a fly which parasites on this grasshopper. And this grasshopper and the parasite, it managed to find the grasshopper, because these grasshoppers are making sounds. And the parasite was able to find the grasshoppers because of the sound. So in a short time, what did the grasshoppers do? Firstly, they reduced the sound to lower frequencies. And finally, they stopped singing. And that happened just in a period for 20 years. As a response of the newcomer, it started the process of evolving a new species, only in a short period. So the processes in nature are really, they are going much faster than we think. So I'm ending up maybe a little faster than my time would be, but I believe, and many biologists with me, they believe that because of this new Pangea in biological terms, that we are bringing animals and plants together that were not together before, and by creating new niches for all of them. Think of if you bring a new tree, a plant, an apple tree, for example, into an area where the apple tree was not before, connected to that apple tree, there will be new animals being evolved to live in that apple tree, and new parasites to live in these the birds and insects and so on. So the whole biological process is changed to such a degree because we have made this new Pangea. And because of this, many biologists will say that no, in 1 million years from now, because we haven't made this new Pangea, we don't talk about the collapse and the sixth extinction of species. We are talking about a doubling of amount of species compared to what we have now. And we have seen it many places in around the world. Only in England, for example, since the year 1700, they are created about 7 or 8 new plant species. The process has gone very quick, partly because of hybridization, partly because plants have been taken into England and are isolated there and has changed. So this process, when it comes to biology, is very strong and is going quite quickly. But if we look at it in the longer term, there will be many more plants, many more animals. So we are not experiencing this sixth extinction. It means that we have created a new genesis by humans. So the story telling us about the extinction of species is exaggerated, and probably the opposite process is taking place. Because we have moved the plants and animals all around the world, we have changed the biology to a large extent, and that will bring up new species in future. Thanks.